She wanted me gone. But I don't fall that easily.
The cabin door of the Gulfstream G650 swung open at 30,000 feet, and my wife Ava stood there with her manicured hand on the emergency release, smiling like she'd just won the lottery. "Fall like the trash you are, Nick," she said, her voice barely audible over the screaming wind that suddenly filled the luxury cabin. My 4-year-old daughter Emma clung to my leg, her tiny fingers digging into my jeans as the aircraft shuddered. The mountain peaks of Colorado stretched endlessly below us, jagged and unforgiving in the afternoon sun. "Mommy, what's happening?" Emma's voice was lost in the chaos, but I felt her trembling against me. Evelyn, my mother-in-law, stood behind Ava with that same cold satisfaction I'd seen at every family gathering for the past 5 years. The woman who'd made it clear from day one that her daughter had married beneath her station. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, even in the howling wind, and her diamond earrings caught the light as she nodded approvingly at her daughter's handiwork. "This isn't the in-flight entertainment I signed up for," I muttered, my military training kicking in as I assessed the situation. 2 emergency parachutes hung on the wall behind them. They'd planned this. The sick witches had actually planned to throw me and my daughter out of a moving aircraft. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 hours ago, I'd been the grateful son-in-law, accepting their generous offer of a family ski trip to Aspen. I should have known better when Ava suggested we take Emma along. My wife hadn't shown interest in spending time with our daughter since the custody hearing started. "You really think you can take Emma from me?" Ava's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "I'm a senior partner at Morrison, Blake & Associates. You're a washed-up security consultant who lives in a studio apartment above a boxing gym." She wasn't wrong about the apartment. After our separation 6 months ago, I'd moved into the cheapest place I could find, 800 square feet of disappointment above Ray's boxing gym in downtown Denver. The walls were thin enough that I could hear every grunt and thud from the training sessions below. But it was mine, and more importantly, it was somewhere Ava's money couldn't reach. "The judge will see the surveillance footage from your apartment building," Evelyn added, her voice carrying that aristocratic tone that made everything sound like a royal decree. "The drinking, the women you've been bringing home." Insistence. That was rich, considering I'd been sober for 2 years, and the only woman who'd been in my apartment was Mrs. Chen from downstairs, asking me to fix her garbage disposal. "You've been watching me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Of course they had. Rich people don't get rich by playing fair. "We've been documenting your decline," Ava corrected. "The court will see that Emma needs stability, a real home, not some pathetic bachelor pad where her father wallows in self-pity." Aircraft lurched suddenly, and I grabbed the nearest seat to steady myself and Emma. Through the open door, I could see we were flying over the Rockies, probably somewhere near Vail. The pilot, Tom, Ava's younger brother, hadn't said a word since takeoff. I wondered if he knew what his sister and mother had planned, or if they'd kept him in the dark too. "Here's what's going to happen," Evelyn said, stepping closer. She had to shout over the wind now. "You're going to take that parachute and jump, both of you. We'll tell the authorities it was a tragic accident. A desperate father facing the loss of custody, who couldn't bear the thought of losing his daughter." "But you're insane," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I was calculating distances, wind speed, the weight difference between Emma and me. My time in the 82nd Airborne was 15 years behind me, but some skills you never forget. "We're practical," Ava replied. "The life insurance policy will take care of Emma's funeral expenses. What's left will go into a trust fund that I'll manage, of course." That's when it hit me. They weren't planning for Emma to survive either. This wasn't about custody. This was about elimination, complete and total. I thought about the events that had led us here, the marriage that had started as a fairy tale and slowly rotted from the inside. Ava's increasing coldness, her late nights at the office, the way she'd started treating me like hired help instead of her husband, the discovery of her affair with Brady Collins, my former Army buddy who'd introduced us in the first place, the humiliation of finding out through a private investigator's photos instead of having the courage to confront her directly. But mostly, I thought about Emma. My little girl who still believed in fairy tales and happy endings, who drew pictures of our family with stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, who asked me every night when Mommy was coming home, "Daddy?" Emma looked up at me with those huge brown eyes. My eyes, not Ava's cold blue ones. "Are we going to fly like Superman?" "Something like that, sweetheart," I said, reaching for the larger parachute pack. "Just like Superman." Smile widened. How touching, a father's love. I strapped Emma to my chest with the tandem harness, her small body warm against mine. She giggled, thinking this was all some elaborate game. The innocence in that sound made my chest tight with rage. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said, adjusting the straps and checking the altimeter on my wrist. "I actually loved you once." "Past tense noted," Ava replied. "I defended you to everyone. My family, my friends, my army buddies who said you were cold as ice. I told them they didn't know the real you." I pulled the goggles down over Emma's eyes, making sure they were secure. Turns out they were right. They just didn't know how cold. Evelyn stepped forward, her patience apparently wearing thin. "Enough drama. Jump, or we'll push you." I looked at both women, my wife of 6 years and her sociopathic mother, and realized I'd never really known either of them. The Ava I'd fallen in love with had been a carefully constructed facade, designed to reel in a decent man who could provide stability while she climbed the corporate ladder. The mask had finally come off. "See you around," I said, and then I jumped. The free fall lasted exactly 43 seconds. I know because I counted, using the rhythm to keep myself calm while Emma screamed in terror against my chest. The mountains rushed up toward us like an avalanche in reverse, all white peaks and dark shadows. I pulled the ripcord at 8,000 feet, and the parachute deployed with a jerk that rattled my teeth. Emma stopped screaming and started laughing. The sudden quiet after the wind was probably a relief. "That was fun, Daddy. Can we do it again?" "Maybe later, baby girl." We landed hard in a snowbank about 3 miles from what looked like a small mountain settlement. I could see smoke rising from chimneys and the distant glow of electric lights. My left ankle twisted on impact, sending a spike of pain up my leg, but nothing felt broken. Emma was fine, giggling and trying to eat snow while I gathered up the parachute. The sun was setting behind the peaks, and the temperature was dropping fast. We needed shelter, food, and a way to contact the outside world. But first, I needed to figure out how to explain to the authorities that my wife had just tried to homicide me and my daughter at 30,000 feet. As I picked up Emma and started trudging through the snow toward the lights, I allowed myself one moment of satisfaction. Ava and Evelyn thought they'd eliminated their problem. They thought I was just another weak man who'd crumble under pressure. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The settlement turned out to be Copper Ridge, population 847, according to the weathered sign at the edge of town. It was the kind of place that existed primarily to service hunters and the occasional lost tourist. One main street with a general store, a bar called the Antler, and a small motel that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. Emma had fallen asleep in my arms during the 2-hour trek through the snow. My ankle throbbed with each step, but I kept moving. The alternative was freezing to death in the Colorado wilderness, which would have made Ava's job a lot easier. The first person I encountered was a grizzled man in his 60s, loading supplies into a beat-up pickup truck outside the general store. He took one look at me, a man carrying a sleeping child, both of us soaked and shivering, and didn't ask questions. "You folks need help?" he asked, setting down a bag of rock salt. "We had an accident," I said, which was technically true. "Plane went down about 3 miles east of here. We need to get to a phone." The man, who introduced himself as Dale Hutchinson, loaded us into his truck and drove us to the Antler. The bar was warm and dimly lit, with the kind of atmosphere that invited people to mind their own business. Perfect for a man who'd just been thrown out of an airplane by his homicidal wife. Dale's wife, Martha, ran the place, and she took one look at Emma and immediately went into grandmother mode. Within minutes, my daughter was wrapped in a blanket by the fireplace, eating chicken soup and telling Martha all about our Superman adventure. You said your plane went down? Martha asked, bringing me a cup of coffee that was strong enough to wake the dead. Engine trouble, I lied smoothly. We had to bail out. The pilot might have made it to an emergency landing, but I need to contact the authorities. Reused was to contact my brother Tom and find out if he'd been part of the plan or just an unwitting accomplice. Tom had always been weak-willed when it came to family pressure, but I couldn't believe he'd knowingly participate in attempted homicide. Martha let me use the phone behind the bar. I dialed Tom's cell number and waited, my heart hammering as it rang. Nick? Tom's voice was strained, worried. Jesus Christ, are you okay? Where are you? We're alive, I said. That's more than your sister planned. Was a long pause. I didn't know, Tom said finally. I swear to God, I didn't know what they were planning. Ava told me you'd agreed to some kind of extreme sports thing, skydiving as part of a custody agreement demonstration. I almost laughed. Even when committing felonies, Ava found ways to make it sound legal. Where did you land? I asked. Denver International. The FBI is here, Nick. Ava and Mom are being questioned. They're saying you went crazy, grabbed Emma, and jumped. They're calling it a homicide self-harm attempt. Of course they were. Ava had probably been practicing her grieving widow act during the flight back. Tom, I need you to listen carefully. Your sister and mother just attempted to commit double homicide. They opened that cabin door, intending for both Emma and me to die. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Another pause. I believe you, he said quietly. Ava's been different lately, colder. And Mom, she's been talking about you like you're some kind of disease that needs to be eliminated. I need you to do something for me, I said. Check the aircraft. Look for any evidence of premeditation, extra parachutes, anything that shows they planned this. Already did, Tom said. There's a folder in Mom's carry-on bag. Looks like legal documents, insurance papers, stuff like that. I haven't looked through it, but the FBI will. Smart boy. Maybe there was hope for him after all. One more thing, I said. I need you to call Ray Martinez at Ray's boxing gym in Denver. Tell him Nick needs the emergency package. What's the emergency package? Trembling. Ray will know. Roofing. I hung up and turned to find Dale and Martha watching me with concerned expressions. Sounds like you're in some serious trouble, Dale observed. The worst kind, I agreed. The kind that involves lawyers and rich people. Martha refilled my coffee cup. You running from the law? Running to it, actually. But I need to make sure my daughter and I survive long enough to tell our story. Unwilling tightened. Over the next hour, I explained the situation to Dale and Martha. Not the whole truth, but enough to make them understand why we needed to stay hidden for a while. They were good people. The kind who understood that sometimes the system doesn't work the way it's supposed to. Dale offered to let us stay in his hunting cabin about 5 miles up the mountain. It was isolated, well-stocked, and had a landline phone. More importantly, it was somewhere Ava's people couldn't find us, while I figured out my next move. Emma woke up as we were preparing to leave, refreshed from her nap, and apparently none the worse for our ordeal. Daddy, where are we? She asked, looking around the bar with wide eyes. We're on an adventure, sweetheart. We're going to stay in a cabin in the mountains for a few days. Like camping? Exactly like camping. She clapped her hands together, delighted. At 4 years old, she had no concept of the danger we were in. To her, this was all just an exciting story. Dale's cabin was rustic but comfortable, with a stone fireplace, a well-stocked kitchen, and 2 bedrooms. More importantly, it had a tool cabinet with a decent selection of hunting rifles and ammunition. Dale handed me the key without being asked. Just in case, he said. After Dale left, I tucked Emma into bed and sat by the fireplace, trying to process everything that had happened. 12 hours ago, I'd been a divorced dad fighting for custody of his daughter. Now, I was a fugitive from my own wife, hiding in the Colorado mountains while she spun lies to federal investigators. The phone rang at midnight. I answered it cautiously. Nick? It's Ray. Ray Martinez had been my boxing coach since I'd moved into the apartment above his gym. He was also a former Marine who understood the value of preparation for worst-case scenarios. I got a call from your brother-in-law, Ray continued. He said you needed the emergency package. That's right. It's ready. Cash, clean phone, contact information for some people who owe me favors. The usual. Ra had set up the emergency package after my divorce proceedings started getting ugly. He'd seen too many good men destroyed by vindictive ex-wives and their expensive lawyers. The package was insurance, a way to disappear and regroup if things went completely sideways. I'll need it delivered, I said. Already on the way. My nephew Carlos is driving up tonight. He'll be there by dawn. Ray, there's something else. My wife and her mother just tried to end me and Emma. Threw us out of a plane at 30,000 feet. There was a long silence. You're serious? Dead serious. They're telling the FBI it was attempted homicide self-harm on my part. Jesus Christ, Nick. What do you need? Time to think. And maybe some advice from someone who's dealt with rich, vindictive witches before. Ray chuckled grimly. Brother, I've got stories that would curl your hair. Here's the thing about people like your wife. They think money and connections make them untouchable. They've never dealt with someone who's willing to fight dirty. I'm not looking to break the law, Ray. Imprisonment. You don't have to break the law to destroy someone. You just have to be smarter than they are. And from what you've told me about your wife, that shouldn't be too hard. After I hung up with Ray, I spent the rest of the night planning. Ava thought she held all the cards: money, connections, legal expertise. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. Carlos arrived at dawn with a duffel bag containing everything Ray had promised. $20,000 in cash, a clean cell phone, and a list of contacts that read like a directory of people who operated in the gray areas of the law. Private investigators, former cops, computer specialists, and what Ray diplomatically called problem solvers. Emma was still asleep when I stepped outside to meet him. Carlos was Ray's nephew, a quiet kid in his 20s who asked no questions and remembered nothing. He handed me the bag and a thermos of coffee, then disappeared back down the mountain road. I used the clean phone to call Detective Sarah Walsh, a former Army MP who now worked private investigations in Denver. Ray had vouched for her, and her reputation for discretion was legendary. Ray said you might be calling, she said without preamble. I've been watching the news. Your wife is quite the actress. Her interviews? Channel 7 ran a piece this morning. Grieving wife, concerned about her husband's mental state, fears for her daughter's safety. Very convincing, if you didn't know better. The rage that had been simmering in my chest since yesterday flared into something hotter. Ava was playing the victim while painting me as an unhinged father who'd endangered his own child. What do you need from me? Sarah asked. Everything you can find on my wife's affair with Brady Collins. Financial records, communication logs, hotel receipts. Everything that proves she's been planning this for months. Millions. Brady Collins. That name sounds familiar. Former Army, served with me in the Middle East. He introduced me to Ava 6 years ago. Negligent. Ah, the long con. Let me guess. He stayed close to the family, played the supportive friend, then moved in when the marriage started falling apart. Something like that. I'll need 48 hours and a $5,000 retainer. Done. After I hung up with Sarah, I called Tom again. He answered on the first ring. Nick, thank God. The FBI wants to interview me about the flight. They're treating this as a federal case now. What's Ava's story? She's saying you've been increasingly unstable since the separation. Drinking, making threats, talking about taking Emma somewhere where she'd never find you. She claims you grabbed Emma and jumped before anyone could stop you. And the physical evidence? That's where it gets interesting. The FBI found the legal documents in Mom's bag. Custody papers, but also life insurance policies and some kind of financial power of attorney. Their lawyer is calling it preparation for various contingencies. Rich people had lawyers who could make attempted homicide sound like estate planning. Tom, I need you to do something for me, and it's going to require some courage. What kind of courage? The kind that might piss off your sister and mother. There was a long pause. What do you need? Access to the family's financial records, bank accounts, investment portfolios, trust funds, everything. Nick, I can't. Your sister just tried to homicide your niece, I interrupted. Your 4-year-old niece, Tom. She was willing to let Emma die to get rid of me. Are you really going to protect her now? Another pause, longer this time. What exactly are you looking for? Patterns, large cash withdrawals, payments to unusual sources, anything that shows premeditation. If Ava planned this, she would have needed money to make it happen. Private investigators to build a case against me. Maybe payments to people who could provide false testimony. I'll see what I can do. And Tom, be careful. If they're willing to commit homicide, they won't hesitate to eliminate other inconvenient family members. Emma woke up around noon, cheerful and hungry. I made her pancakes on the cabin's ancient gas stove while she chattered about the adventure we were having. When are we going home, Daddy? We need to stay here for a little while longer, sweetheart. Daddy has some work to do. What kind of work? Do you explain to a 4-year-old that her mother is a sociopath who tried to end both of you? Grown-up work. Boring stuff. She accepted this explanation with the easy trust of childhood and went back to her pancakes. The clean phone rang while Emma was napping. Sarah Walsh had preliminary information. Your instincts were right, she said. Brady Collins has been receiving regular payments from your wife's personal account for the past 8 months. $5,000 a month, listed as consulting fees. Completely. Consulting on what? That's where it gets interesting. Collins has been working with a private investigation firm called Blackstone Security. They specialize in what they call domestic asset protection. Basically, helping wealthy spouses build cases for divorce proceedings. So Ava hired Brady to investigate me. More than that, Collins has been documenting your daily routine, your financial situation, your living conditions. He's also been feeding information to your wife's legal team about your psychological state. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Brady had been my friend, my army buddy, the man who'd introduced me to the woman I'd married. And he'd been systematically destroying my life for money. There's more, Sarah continued. Collins has been seeing a psychiatrist, Dr. Rebecca Morrison. She's prepared a psychological evaluation of you, based on Collins' observations and your wife's testimony. A psychological evaluation of someone she's never met happens more often than you'd think. Dr. Morrison has a reputation for providing favorable evaluations for clients who can afford her fees. His favorable. According to her preliminary assessment, you're a textbook case of post-divorce psychological deterioration, with violent tendencies and potential for harm to yourself and others. I felt the walls closing in. Ava hadn't just tried to homicide me. She'd spent months building a legal framework that would justify my death as a public service. Sarah, I need you to dig deeper. Find out everything you can about Dr. Morrison's relationship with my wife's law firm, and see if you can trace any payments from my mother-in-law to Collins, or anyone else involved in this. That's going to cost more than $5,000. I'll get you the money. After I hung up, I sat by the fireplace and tried to process the scope of Ava's planning. This wasn't a crime of passion or a spur-of-the-moment decision. She'd been systematically destroying my reputation and building a case for my elimination for months. The question was, why? Our marriage had been troubled, but divorce would have been simpler and less risky than homicide. Unless... I called Tom back. I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. How much money are we talking about here? Ava's inheritance, the family trust, all of it. Nick, I don't think... Tom, your sister tried to end your niece. How much? A long sigh. The family trust is worth about $50 million. Mom controls it now, but when she dies, it gets split between Ava and me. If something happened to me, Ava would get everything. And if something happened to Ava, it would go to her children. But if Emma died too, it would revert to Evelyn, and then to you when she dies. Yeah, $50 million. Enough to justify homicide. Especially if you were the kind of person who saw other human beings as obstacles to be eliminated. But there was something else. Something that had been nagging at me since the plane ride. Ava's coldness toward Emma hadn't started recently. She'd been distant from our daughter since birth, showing the kind of detached interest you might have in a houseplant. Tom, I need to ask you something else. Has Ava ever expressed any unusual views about Emma? Punished. What do you mean? Presumption. Has she ever talked about Emma like she was a burden? Or mentioned that her life would be easier without children? Another long pause. There was something she said at Christmas. We were all drinking, and Emma was being fussy. Ava made some comment about how children were just anchors that kept you from achieving your full potential. Nemu. Did she say anything else? Shamu. She said that successful women in her position sometimes had to make difficult choices about priorities. Menstrual. The pieces were falling into place. Ava hadn't just wanted to get rid of me. She'd wanted to eliminate Emma too. A child was an inconvenience, a reminder of domestic responsibilities that interfered with her career ambitions. And if both Emma and I died in a tragic accident, Ava would be free to pursue her relationship with Brady while maintaining control of the family fortune. It was elegant in its simplicity and monstrous in its execution. But Ava had made one crucial error in her planning. She'd assumed I would die quietly, another casualty of her ambition. She was about to learn how wrong she'd been. 3 days later, Sarah Walsh called with the kind of information that changes everything. I found the smoking tool, she said. Your mother-in-law made a payment of $50,000 to a company called Alpine Consulting 2 weeks ago. Reinstall. What's Alpine Consulting? On paper, it's a risk management firm. In reality, it's a front for people who solve problems that can't be solved through legal channels. Menstrual. But felt something cold settle in my stomach. What kind of problems? Slamming. The permanent kind. Nick, I think your wife and mother-in-law hired professional butchers. Thurs. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, more isolated. Emma was playing with wooden blocks by the fireplace, building elaborate castles and narrating complex stories about princesses and dragons. She had no idea that her mother had paid strangers to ensure she'd never build another castle. Are you sure? Misled. I'm sure enough that I think you need to contact the FBI immediately. This has gone way beyond a domestic dispute. The FBI thinks I'm the one who tried to commit homicide. Rinse. Then we need to change their minds. I'm sending you everything I found. Financial records, communication logs, background checks on everyone involved. It's enough to at least raise serious questions about your wife's version of events. Aftermath. After Sarah hung up, I spent an hour reviewing the documents she'd sent to my secure email. The picture they painted was devastating. A months-long conspiracy involving my wife, my mother-in-law, my former best friend, and at least 3 other people I'd never heard of. But it was also incomplete. I had evidence of financial transactions and suspicious communications, but nothing that directly proved attempted homicide. A good lawyer, and Ava had the best money could buy, could explain away most of it as legitimate business expenses and coincidental timing. I needed something more concrete, something that would force the authorities to take a closer look at Ava's story. The clean phone rang. Tom's voice was strained, worried. Nick, you need to know something. Ava and Mom are planning to hold a press conference tomorrow. They're going to announce a reward for information leading to your capture. How much? $100,000. $100,000 would turn every bounty hunter and amateur detective in Colorado into a potential threat. Ava was escalating the situation, trying to force me out of hiding before I could build a case against her. There's something else, Tom continued. Brady Collins has been staying at the house since you disappeared. He's been helping coordinate the search efforts. Of course he had. Brady was probably enjoying his new role as the supportive family friend, comforting the grieving wife while plotting how to spend his share of the insurance money. Tom, I need you to do something for me. Something dangerous. I need you to get me recordings of Ava and Brady talking privately. Conversations where they think no one else is listening. How am I supposed to do that? You're a pilot. You understand electronics. Plant some recording devices around the house. Her office, the living room, anywhere they might have private conversations. Nick, if they catch me, if you don't help me, your sister is going to get away with attempted homicide. And the next time she decides someone is inconvenient, it might be you. reinforced. Tom was quiet for a long time. Okay, he said finally, but I'll need equipment. Sarah Walsh can help you with that. Tell her I authorized the purchase. After I hung up with Tom, I made another call. This one to Ray Martinez. How's the mountain air treating you? Ray asked. Like a prison sentence. Ray, I need to ask you something. If someone wanted to disappear completely, new identity, new life, the whole package, how would they go about it? You thinking of running? I'm thinking of contingency planning. If this goes sideways, Emma and I might need to vanish. It's possible, but it's expensive and complicated. And once you go down that road, there's no coming back. How expensive? $200,000 minimum. And that's just for documentation. You'd need ongoing support, safe houses, the whole infrastructure. About the $20,000 in cash sitting in the duffel bag. It was enough to survive for a few months, but not enough to disappear forever. Ray, what do you know about recovering assets from offshore accounts? Ray chuckled. Now you're talking my language. You think your wife has been hiding money? I think my wife and her mother have been preparing for this scenario for a long time. They've got contingency plans, backup resources, probably money stashed in places the FBI will never find. And you want to find it first. I want to level the playing field. That's going to require some specialized help. I know a guy who used to work for the Treasury Department, tracking down hidden assets for tax evasion cases. He's freelance now, and he's very good at finding money that doesn't want to be found. Set up a meeting. Nick, are you sure about this? Once you start down this path, you're not just defending yourself anymore. You're going on the offensive. Ray is light innocently by the fireplace and thought about the $50,000 Evelyn had paid to have her ended. They tried to homicide my daughter, Ray. The gloves are already off. That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat by the fireplace and planned my war. Ava thought she held all the advantages: money, connections, legal expertise, public sympathy. She'd built her case carefully, systematically destroying my reputation while positioning herself as the victim. But Ava had never been in actual combat. She'd never learned that the most dangerous enemy is the one who has nothing left to lose. She was about to get an education. The next morning, I watched Ava's press conference on the cabin's old television. She stood behind a podium at the Denver Marriott, flanked by her lawyers and FBI agents, looking every inch the grieving wife and concerned mother. My husband is a troubled man, she said, her voice breaking at precisely the right moments. The separation has been difficult for him, and I'm afraid he's not thinking clearly. I just want my daughter back safely. Manslaughter stood in the background, playing the role of supportive family friend. He'd lost weight since I'd last seen him, and his eyes had the hollow look of someone who wasn't sleeping well. Good. Guilt was a powerful enemy, even for sociopaths. We're offering a reward of $100,000 for any information that leads to the safe return of Emma and the peaceful resolution of this situation, Ava continued. Nick, if you're watching this, please bring our daughter home. Whatever problems we have, we can work them out. Performance was flawless. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed it myself. But I did know the truth, and soon, everyone else would too. The recording devices Tom planted in Evelyn's mansion paid off faster than I'd expected. Within 24 hours, he'd captured a conversation between Ava and Brady that would have made a federal prosecutor weep with joy. I listened to the audio file on my laptop while Emma napped and felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. The FBI is starting to ask uncomfortable questions. Brady's voice was tense, worried. They want to know why your mother made that payment to Alpine Consulting. Mother's lawyers will handle that, Ava replied. It was a legitimate security consultation. We were concerned about Nick's increasingly erratic behavior. $50,000 for a security consultation? Rich people pay premium prices for premium services, Brady. The FBI understands that. What if they dig deeper? What if they find out about the other payments? There was a pause. What other payments? The money your mother gave to Dr. Morrison for the psychological evaluation. The payments to that private investigator in California who's been building the case against Nick. Brady, shut up. We've been through this. Everything we've done has been legal and justified. Nick is unstable, potentially dangerous, and we took appropriate precautions. Appropriate precautions? Ava, we tried to end him. Another pause, longer this time. We defended ourselves against a man who was threatening our family. If Nick hadn't been planning to take Emma and disappear, none of this would have been necessary. You opened the cabin door at 30,000 feet. I opened the door because my husband was holding my daughter hostage and threatening to jump. I was trying to talk him down, and he jumped before I could stop him. Brady's laugh was bitter. You really believe your own lies, don't you? I believe in protecting my family and my future. If you can't handle that, Brady, maybe you should reconsider your involvement in this situation. The threat in Ava's voice was unmistakable. Brady was becoming a liability, and liabilities had a way of disappearing around my wife. I'm in this as deep as you are, Brady said finally. But if this goes sideways, it won't go sideways if everyone sticks to the story. Nick is unstable. He took Emma. He jumped. Everything else is just rich people being careful with their money. The recording ended there, but it was enough. Ava had essentially confessed to conspiracy and attempted homicide, and Brady had corroborated the key details. With the financial evidence Sarah had gathered, it was enough to shift the FBI's focus from me to my wife. But I wasn't ready to contact the authorities yet. I had one more card to play. I called Ray's contact at the Treasury Department, a man named Marcus Webb, who specialized in tracking hidden assets. Webb agreed to meet me at a truck stop outside of Copper Ridge, away from prying eyes and electronic surveillance. Webb turned out to be a thin, nervous man in his 50s who looked like he'd spent too many years staring at computer screens in windowless rooms. But his reputation was solid, and Ray vouched for his discretion. Your wife is smarter than most, Webb said after reviewing the financial documents Sarah had provided. She's been moving money through a network of shell companies and offshore accounts for almost a year. But she made one mistake. What mistake? She the same law firm to set up all the shell companies. Morrison, Blake & Associates has been handling the paperwork for every transaction. A spark of hope. Her own law firm? Makes sense from her perspective. She trusts them. They understand the need for discretion, and she can monitor the process directly. But it also creates a paper trail that connects her to every transaction. Webb pulled out a tablet and showed me a complex diagram that looked like a family tree designed by someone on hallucinogens. Your wife and mother-in-law have moved approximately $12 million through this network over the past 10 months. The money is currently sitting in accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore. 12 million? That's just what I've found so far. There's probably more. I stared at the diagram, trying to process the scope of Ava's planning. She hadn't just been preparing to eliminate me. She'd been preparing to disappear afterward, taking a significant portion of the family fortune with her. Can you recover the money? Webb smiled for the first time since we'd met. That depends on how creative you want to get. 2 hours later, I had a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. Webb would use his Treasury Department contacts to flag the offshore accounts for investigation, claiming they were connected to potential tax evasion. The scrutiny would freeze the assets and force Ava to explain their origin. Meanwhile, Sarah would provide the FBI with the recordings Tom had made, along with all the financial evidence we'd gathered. The combination of Ava's confession and the money trail would be impossible to ignore. But the masterstroke would be my public reappearance. Instead of turning myself in quietly, I would hold my own press conference, with Emma safely hidden somewhere Ava couldn't reach her, and present my evidence to the world. Ava had used the media to paint me as an unstable kidnapper. I would use the same media to expose her as a would-be butcher. The plan required precise timing and considerable risk. If any element went wrong, I could end up in federal custody while Ava walked free. But if it worked, it would destroy her completely. I spent that evening explaining to Emma that we were going to play a game of hide-and-seek. She would stay with Dale and Martha at their house in Copper Ridge, while Daddy went to take care of some business.
How long will you be gone?
She asked, her lower lip trembling slightly. Just a few days, sweetheart, and then we'll be together again, and no one will ever try to separate us. Promise? I promise. It was a promise I intended to keep, no matter what it cost. The next morning, I drove down the mountain toward Denver, leaving Emma in the care of two people who understood that sometimes you have to protect children from their own parents. Ava thought she'd won. She thought I was hiding in the wilderness, broken and defeated, while she consolidated her victory. She was about to learn that some battles are won by the person who's willing to risk everything. I held my press conference in the lobby of the Denver FBI building at exactly 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, timing it to coincide with the local news broadcasts. I'd called every major media outlet in Colorado, promising them exclusive access to evidence that would completely change the narrative of the Nick Patterson case. 23 reporters showed up, along with 4 FBI agents who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else in the world. I walked into that lobby wearing my best suit, the one I'd worn to my wedding 6 years earlier, and carrying a briefcase full of evidence that would either vindicate me or send me to prison. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "my name is Nick Patterson, and I'm here to surrender myself to federal custody. But first, I want to tell you what really happened on that airplane," thrilled as I laid out the entire conspiracy. The months of planning, the financial transactions, the hired butchers, the systematic destruction of my reputation. I played selected portions of the recordings Tom had made, including Ava's admission that she'd opened the cabin door at 30,000 feet. "My wife didn't try to save our daughter," I said, looking directly into the CNN camera. "She tried to homicide her. The only reason Emma and I are alive today is because I had military training that allowed me to survive a situation no civilian should ever face." The FBI agents tried to interrupt several times, but the media circus had its own momentum. This was the kind of story that made careers. A wealthy socialite accused of attempting to homicide her own child for inheritance money. After the press conference, I was arrested and taken into custody. But the damage to Ava's narrative was already done. Within hours, every news outlet in the country was running stories about the parachute homicide plot and the Black Widow of Denver. Walsh had timed her delivery of evidence to the FBI perfectly. While I was giving my press conference, she was meeting with federal prosecutors, providing them with financial records, communication logs, and recorded confessions that painted a clear picture of premeditated, attempted homicide. Tom came forward that same afternoon, admitting his role in recording his sister's conversations and providing additional evidence of the family's conspiracy. His testimony was crucial. He was the pilot who'd witnessed the events on the airplane, and his version of events contradicted Ava's story completely. But the real bombshell came when Marcus Webb's Treasury Department contacts began their investigation of the offshore accounts. Not only did they find the $12 million Ava had hidden, they discovered evidence of tax evasion going back 5 years and money laundering connections that implicated several other wealthy Denver families. Ava's world began to collapse with stunning speed. By Wednesday morning, she'd been arrested on charges of conspiracy to commit homicide, attempted homicide, tax evasion, and money laundering. Brady Collins was arrested the same day, along with Dr. Morrison and 2 executives from Alpine Consulting. Evelyn tried to flee the country, but was stopped at Denver International Airport with $2 million in cash and a fake passport. The same airport where she'd landed after trying to homicide her granddaughter. I spent 3 days in federal custody while prosecutors reviewed the evidence. On Friday afternoon, all charges against me were dropped, and I was released to the custody of Emma, who'd been staying with Tom under protective supervision. The reunion with my daughter was everything I'd hoped for and more. She ran into my arms like I'd been gone for years instead of days, chattering excitedly about her adventures with Uncle Tom and asking when we could go home. "We can go home right now," I told her. But first, I had one more stop to make. The Denver County Jail allowed me to visit Ava on Saturday morning. She was being held without bail, pending trial on multiple felony charges. The woman I'd married 6 years earlier looked like she'd aged a decade in the past week. She sat across from me in the visitor's room, wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with her complexion, and stared at me with undisguised hatred. "You destroyed everything," she said. "I survived everything," I corrected. "There's a difference. The lawyers say I might get life in prison. You tried to homicide a 4-year-old child, Ava, your own daughter. What did you think would happen? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You always were naive, Nick. You think this is about justice? This is about money and power, and you just got lucky. But Emma's safe, and that's all that matters to me. Emma, Ava spat. You turned my own daughter against me. I didn't have to turn her against you. You did that yourself when you tried to throw her out of an airplane. Ava's composure finally cracked. She was supposed to die with you. It would have been clean, simple, a tragic accident. Instead, you had to survive and ruin everything. Fencing was being recorded, of course. The federal prosecutors would add it to their already overwhelming case against her. Goodbye, Ava, I said, standing up. I hope you find some peace in prison. Go to heck, Nick. Already been there, I replied. It was a private jet at 30,000 feet, and my wife was trying to push me out the door. Relinquid. I walked out of that jail and never looked back. 6 months later, Ava was convicted on all charges and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Brady Collins received 25 years. Evelyn died of a heart attack while awaiting trial, taking her secrets and her offshore account numbers with her. The family fortune was largely recovered and placed in trust for Emma, with Tom and me serving as co-trustees. Emma would never want for anything, but, more importantly, she'd never again be seen as an obstacle to someone else's ambitions. As for me, I used part of the recovered money to buy a house in the mountains near Copper Ridge, where Emma and I could start over, surrounded by people who understood the value of protecting children from monsters, even when those monsters happened to be their own parents. Emma adapted to our new life with the resilience of childhood. She made friends with the local kids, learned to ski, and built snow forts with the same enthusiasm she'd once reserved for wooden block castles. Sometimes, late at night, when she was sleeping safely in her bed, I would think about that moment in the airplane, when Ava had opened the cabin door. The wind, the terror in Emma's eyes, the absolute certainty that we were going to die. But we hadn't died. We'd survived, and we'd won. And every morning when Emma ran into my arms, chattering about her dreams and her plans for the day, I was reminded that some battles are worth fighting, no matter what they cost. Ava had tried to destroy us both, to protect her ambitions and her money. Instead, she'd lost everything, while Emma and I had found something worth more than all the offshore accounts in the world. We'd found our way home.